The flashbulbs popping outside the Pierre Hotel were blinding, but they were nothing compared to the blinding ego of Benedict Calloway. He stood on the red carpet, a man who believed he had conquered the world, holding the waist of a woman who wasn't his wife. He thought the night was his coronation, the moment he would merge his tech empire with the mysterious Apex Group. But he forgot the first rule of power: never bite the hand that fed you, especially when you don't realize whose hand it is. Tonight, Benedict wouldn't just lose a deal. He was about to lose his reality. The silence in the master suite of the Calloway penthouse was not peaceful. It was suffocating. It was the kind of silence that precedes a natural disaster, heavy with barometric pressure. Victoria Calloway sat at her vanity, her fingers lightly tracing the grain of the antique oak. She wasn't looking at her reflection. She was looking at the small framed photograph tucked into the corner of the mirror, a picture of her and Benedict from 7 years ago eating pizza on the floor of a studio apartment in Queens. He had looked at her with such hunger, then not for money, but for her. "Are you still sitting there?" The voice sliced through the room. Benedict Calloway walked out of the walk-in closet, adjusting the cuffs of his bespoke Brioni tuxedo. At 38, Benedict was a specimen of modern success. He was handsome in a sharp, predatory way, with eyes that constantly scanned for the next advantage. He didn't look at Victoria. He looked at his watch. "I asked you a question, Victoria," he snapped, checking his reflection in the floor-to-length mirror. "The car will be here in 20 minutes. I assumed you'd have the decency to be elsewhere." Victoria turned slowly. She was wearing a simple silk robe, her hair loose. "Elsewhere, Benedict. It's the Metropolis Gala. I've attended every year since we started the company." Benedict finally looked at her, and his expression was one of exhausted pity, the way one might look at an old dog that could no longer hunt. "We didn't start the company," he corrected, his voice dripping with condescension. "I built Calloway Tech. You made coffee and organized the filing cabinets in the early days. There is a distinction." He walked over, looming over her seated form. "And frankly, tonight is about the future. It's about the Apex merger. I need to project vitality power and the cutting edge. No offense, Vicky, but you project domesticity." He reached out and patted her cheek. It was a gesture so devoid of affection, it felt like a slap. "I've made arrangements for you to go to the Hamptons house for the weekend," Benedict continued, turning back to his cufflinks. "The driver is downstairs. Pack a bag. It'll be good for you. Fresh air." Victoria didn't flinch. "You're taking her, aren't you?" Benedict froze for a fraction of a second, then resumed his motions. He didn't insult her intelligence by pretending he didn't know who she meant. Jessica Monroe, the 24-year-old brand consultant he had hired 6 months ago. The woman who now wore the diamond earrings Victoria had noticed missing from the safe last week. "Jessica is the face of our new marketing campaign," Benedict said smoothly. "It makes business sense for her to be on my arm. She speaks the language of the investors I'm trying to woo. She's vibrant. And I am what? Expired?" Victoria asked, her voice dangerously calm. "You're comfortable, Victoria. You're safe. But you don't belong in the shark tank. Tonight I am meeting the chairman of Apex Group. No one has ever seen him face to face. He's a ghost. But if I sign this deal, Calloway Tech goes global. I become a billionaire, not just a millionaire. I can't risk that by having you standing there asking about people's children or discussing charity bake sales." He grabbed his phone off the dresser. "Go to the Hamptons. Don't wait up. And for God's sake, don't look at the tabloids tomorrow. I don't want you getting emotional over optics." He walked to the door, stopping just before he exited. "I built this life for us, Victoria. The least you can do is step out of the spotlight so I can keep the lights on." With that, he was gone. Victoria sat in the silence for a long minute. Then she reached for her phone. She didn't call the driver. She didn't call a divorce lawyer. She dialed a number she hadn't used in 5 years. A number that bypassed secretaries and assistants and rang directly on a private line in a secure office in Geneva. "Hello." A gruff, gravelly voice answered on the second ring. "Daddy?" Victoria said, her voice finally breaking just a fracture. "Tori." The tone on the other end shifted instantly from professional steel to paternal warmth. "It's been too long, sweetheart. Is everything all right?" "No," Victoria said, standing up and walking to the window to look out at the Manhattan skyline. "No, it's not. You were right. You were right about everything." There was a pause on the line. Winston Mercer, known to the business world as a ruthless liquidator and to the underground elite as the architect, did not gloat. He simply waited. "He's bringing a mistress to the gala tonight," Victoria whispered. "He's discarding me, Daddy. He told me I don't belong in his world." A low, dark chuckle rumbled through the phone. It was a terrifying sound to anyone who wasn't his daughter. His world. The boy thinks he lives in his world. That's adorable. "He thinks he's meeting the chairman of Apex tonight," Victoria said. "He is," Winston replied. "Or rather, he's meeting the chairman's representative. Me." Victoria closed her eyes. "He doesn't know. He still thinks I'm just a poor girl from the Midwest he saved from a diner job. He has no idea that Apex is just one of your subsidiaries. I told you to tell him, Tori, years ago. I wanted to be loved for me," she said fiercely. "Not for the Mercer billions. I wanted to build something with him. But now, I want to burn it down." "Music to my ears," Winston said. "Where are you?" "I'm at the penthouse. He thinks I'm going to the Hamptons." "Change of plans," Winston commanded. "Go to the safe. Not the one in the wall, the one under the floorboards in the guest room, the one he doesn't know about. There is a box there. Put on what's inside. I am landing at Teterboro in 30 minutes. I'm sending a chopper to pick you up from the roof." "Daddy, I can't just show up. I don't have a dress. I look tired." "You are a Mercer," Winston snapped, but with love. "You don't look tired. You look like you're bored with the peasants. And as for the dress, my team is already on the way to the penthouse with the Midnight Collection. You are entering that gala tonight, Victoria. But you are not entering as Mrs. Benedict Calloway, the disregarded wife." Victoria looked at her reflection again. Her posture straightened. The sadness in her eyes hardened into something like diamond, cold sharp, and unbreakable. "How am I entering? You are entering as my daughter, the heiress of Apex, and tonight we aren't just attending a party, we are conducting an execution." The Metropolis Charity Gala was the Super Bowl of New York social climbing. It was held at the Grand Historic Museum, a venue of marble columns and velvet ropes, where the air smelled of expensive perfume and desperation. Benedict Calloway stepped out of the stretch limousine, the flashbulbs erupting like a lightning storm. He buttoned his jacket, flashing a practiced, gleaming smile. He felt electric. Beside him, Jessica Monroe slinked out of the car. She was undeniable, a visual weapon. She wore a dress that was barely legal, a shimmering crimson gown that clung to her curves like a second skin. It was loud, it was aggressive, and it screamed new money. "Benedict over here. Who is the Lady Benedict? Where is Victoria?" The reporters shouted questions, thrusting microphones forward. Benedict paused, placing a possessive hand on Jessica's lower back. He leaned into the microphones. "Victoria is feeling under the weather tonight." Benedict lied effortlessly, his voice smooth baritone. "She insisted I attend to represent the company, and I am lucky enough that Ms. Monroe, our brilliant head of brand strategy, stepped in to ensure Callaway Tech shines tonight." He looked at Jessica, and they shared a look that was far too intimate for a CEO and an employee. The paparazzi ate it up. The headline was already being written in 100 minds: Callaway upgrades. "The wife is out. The bombshell is in." They moved up the stairs, Benedict waving to the crowd. He spotted rivals and competitors, men he had envied for years. Tonight he felt superior to them. He was about to sign the Apex deal. Apex was a conglomerate that owned shipping lines, rare earth mines, and satellite networks. A merger with them meant Benedict would be untouchable. Inside the great hall, the atmosphere was thick with gossip. "Did you see who Benedict brought?" whispered a socialite in vintage Dior, shielding her mouth with a champagne flute. "That's the intern, isn't it?" "Hardly an intern," her husband muttered, "but definitely not Victoria. That man has no shame." "Shame doesn't pay for Gulf Streams," another man chuckled. "If he lands the Apex deal tonight, he can bring a goat as his date, and no one will say a word." Benedict navigated the room like a shark. He introduced Jessica to senators and tech moguls. She played her part well, laughing at the right moments, touching his arm, looking adoringly at him. But every conversation Benedict had was a prelude. He was scanning the room for one thing: the Apex delegation. He had been told by his lawyers that the chairman of Apex never attended these events, but that a senior proxy would be there to finalize the handshake before the lawyers signed the paperwork on Monday. "Benedict," a voice oiled with fake charm, called out. It was Roger Sterling. No, not him. It was Gavin Reed, a competitor in the software space. "Bold choice of companion tonight. Victoria finally get tired of your ego." Benedict swirled his scotch. "Victoria prefers the quiet life, Gavin. Unlike us, she doesn't have the stomach for the big leagues. Jessica here. She's hungry." Jessica smirked. "I prefer ambitious, Gavin. I hear you're banking everything on this Apex merger." Gavin lowered his voice. "Risky move. No one knows who runs that fund." "You're signing a deal with a phantom." "I don't care if it's a phantom as long as the check clears." Benedict scoffed. "Besides, they need me. Callaway Tech has the AI algorithms they lack. I'm the prize here." Suddenly, the room's energy shifted. It wasn't a sound. It was a vibration. The chatter, which had been a dull roar, began to drop in decibels rippling from the entrance of the ballroom inward. The orchestra stopped playing mid-measure. Heads turned. The massive double doors at the top of the grand staircase, usually reserved for royalty or heads of state, were swinging open. Benedict frowned. "What is this?" "The president. No." Gavin whispered, his face losing some color. "Look at the security." 6 men in black suits wearing earpieces walked in first. They weren't the hotel security. They moved with military precision. They fanned out, creating a perimeter. Then a man stepped through. He was older, perhaps in his late 60s, but he possessed a vitality that made him seem ageless. He wore a tuxedo that cost more than most people's houses, cut in a style that was timeless. He had silver hair swept back and eyes that looked like they could burn holes through steel. He carried a cane, not because he needed it, but because it looked like a scepter. The room gasped collectively. "Is that?" someone whispered. "It's him." An older banker near Benedict choked on his drink. I haven't seen him in public in 20 years. That's Winston Mercer. Benedict squinted. Who? Winston Mercer, Gavin hissed. The Wolf of Geneva. He made his fortune destroying companies like yours before breakfast. He's terrifying. What is he doing here? Benedict felt a prickle of unease, but he suppressed it. He's just an old man. But then the old man turned back to the open doors and extended his arm. A woman stepped out. If Jessica Monroe was a neon sign, this woman was moonlight on dark water. She wore a gown of midnight blue velvet that seemed to absorb the light, adorned with sapphires that were so large they looked fake, except everyone knew that nothing on a Mercer was fake. Her hair was swept up in an intricate regal chignon, revealing a neck that was elegant and proud. She stood at the top of the stairs, her hand resting lightly on Winston Mercer's arm. She looked out over the crowd of 500 people with an expression of cool, detached amusement. Benedict dropped his glass. It shattered on the marble floor, sending scotch and crystal flying, but nobody noticed, because the woman on the arm of the most powerful man in the room wasn't a stranger. It was the woman he had told to go to the Hamptons 2 hours ago. It was Victoria. But it wasn't the Victoria he knew. The Victoria he knew wore cardigans and apologized for taking up space. This woman stood like she owned the building. Her makeup was sharper, accentuating her high cheekbones. Her eyes scanned the room, bypassing the senators and the celebrities, and locked directly onto Benedict. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She simply stared at him, and even from 50 feet away, Benedict felt a chill run down his spine that was colder than absolute zero. "Benedict," Jessica tugged at his sleeve, her voice trembling. Isn't that your wife?" Benedict couldn't speak. His brain was trying to recompute reality and failing. "Ladies and gentlemen," the master of ceremonies announced, his voice booming over the speakers, clearly having just been handed a new card. "Please welcome the chairman of Apex Global Holdings, Mr. Winston Mercer, and his daughter, the vice chairwoman of the board, Ms. Victoria Mercer." The silence that followed was absolute. Benedict felt the blood drain from his face so fast he nearly fainted. Vice chairwoman, Apex Global. He looked at the woman he had cheated on, the woman he had belittled, the woman he had left at home like a piece of unwanted furniture. Victoria began to descend the stairs, the sound of her heels echoing like ticking clocks. Every step brought her closer to him. Every step was a countdown to his destruction. The walk from the bottom of the grand staircase to where Benedict Calloway stood felt like a procession, but it was hard to tell if it was for a wedding or a funeral. The crowd, usually a pit of vipers clamoring for attention, parted like the Red Sea. They sensed power. Real old, terrifying power. Victoria moved with a grace Benedict had never seen. Or perhaps he had simply never looked. In their penthouse, she walked softly, trying not to disturb his genius. Here her heels struck the marble with the authority of a gavel. Benedict's mind was racing a hamster wheel of panic and opportunism. She's a Mercer. Victoria is a Mercer. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The Mercers were American royalty steel magnates, turned tech investors, a family that didn't just have money. They printed the economy. Why didn't she tell me? He screamed internally. I married a gold mine, and I've been treating her like a liability. But then the opportunist in him took the wheel. Wait. This is good. This is better than good. I'm married to the vice chairwoman of Apex. The deal is in the bag. I just need to play this right. He shook off Jessica's hand. It was an instinctive, jerky motion, like shaking off a bug. Jessica stumbled slightly in her towering heels, her face flashing with shock and humiliation. "Stay here," Benedict hissed at her. "Benedict!" Jessica's voice was shrill. "What is going on? I said stay here." Benedict stepped forward, smoothing his jacket. He plastered on his most charming, intimate smile, the one he used to close Series A funding. He opened his arms wide as Victoria and Winston reached the floor. "Victoria, darling." Benedict's voice was loud, performative. He wanted the room to hear. He wanted them to see the happy reunion. You naughty girl. You certainly know how to make an entrance. Is this the surprise you were hinting at?" He moved to embrace her, to kiss her cheek, to stake his claim on the prize. Winston Mercer didn't even break stride. He simply shifted his cane from his left hand to his right, effectively creating a barrier between Benedict and his daughter. "Mr. Calloway," Winston said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of a sledgehammer. "I would advise you not to touch the merchandise. You've already made it quite clear you prefer cheaper imports." The crowd gasped. A few nervous titters rippled through the room. Benedict froze his arms, still half open. "Mr. Mercer, surely there is a misunderstanding. Victoria and you are legally married, yes?" Winston interrupted, his eyes boring into Benedict's soul. "For now." Victoria finally looked at him. Up close, Benedict saw something in her eyes that scared him more than her father's anger. He saw nothing. No love, no hate, no hurt. Just a calm, clinical indifference. "Hello, Benedict," she said. Her voice was cool water. "Vicky," he pleaded, dropping his voice to a whisper, trying to create an intimacy bubble. "Deeply sorry about the confusion earlier. I didn't know. Why didn't you tell me who you were? We're partners. We could have ruled the world together." "We were partners," Victoria corrected him. "I was your partner when we ate instant noodles. I was your partner when you cried in my lap, because the bank rejected your first loan. But somewhere along the way, Benedict, you decided I was an accessory." "That's not true. I'm doing this for us." Benedict gestured vaguely at the room. "And who is this?" He pointed a shaking finger back at Jessica, who was standing awkwardly alone. The red dress looking suddenly cheap against the backdrop of Victoria's regal blue. "She's just an employee." "It's optics, Victoria. You know how the game is played." Victoria looked past him at Jessica. Jessica straightened up, trying to muster some defiance, but she withered under the gaze of the woman she had laughed about only hours earlier. "Ms. Monroe," Victoria said, "I believe you're wearing my earrings, the diamond drops. Benedict gave them to me for our 5th anniversary. I noticed they were missing from the safe." The silence in the room was so profound, you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Every eye turned to Jessica's ears. Jessica's hand flew to her earlobes, her face turning a violent shade of crimson. Benedict told me." "Benedict tells a lot of people a lot of things," Victoria said smoothly. "You can keep them. Consider it severance pay." "Severance?" Jessica stammered. "Yes, you're fired. Effective immediately." "You can't fire me," Jessica snapped, looking to Benedict for support. "Benedict is the CEO." Victoria finally smiled. It was a small, terrifying curve of her lips. "We'll get to that." She turned back to Benedict. "Benedict, you were eager to meet the chairman of Apex to discuss the acquisition of Calloway Tech. Well, here he is, and here I am. Shall we discuss business, or would you prefer to continue explaining why you brought your mistress to the most public event of the year while sending your wife to a beach house?" Benedict swallowed hard. The room was watching. Cameras were recording. He was bleeding social capital by the second. He needed to get them into a private room. He needed to get control of the narrative. "Business," Benedict croaked. "Let's talk business. Privately." Winston Mercer nodded once. "The Platinum Room. 5 minutes. Do try to compose yourself, Calloway. You're sweating through your silk." Winston and Victoria walked past him, the crowd parting once again. Benedict was left standing alone in the center of the ballroom, the whispers rising around him like floodwater. He looked back at Jessica, who was frantically taking off the earrings, tears streaming down her face. He didn't help her. He turned and walked toward the Platinum Room. He had a deal to save. The Platinum Room was a sanctuary of mahogany and leather, soundproofed against the noise of the party outside. It was designed for the masters of the universe to carve up the world. Benedict paced the length of the room, downing a glass of whiskey he had poured from the sidebar. He needed to think. Okay. Situation analysis. Victoria is rich, super rich. She's angry, sure. But she's still Victoria. She's soft. She loves me. She stayed with me for 7 years. I just need to remind her of that. And Winston. He's a businessman. If the numbers make sense, he'll deal. Calloway Tech is worth $3 billion. He can't ignore that. The door opened. Winston and Victoria entered. They didn't sit. They stood at the head of the long conference table, looking at Benedict like a board of directors reviewing a failed intern. "Sit down, Benedict," Winston commanded. Benedict sat. He tried to lean back to look relaxed, but his body betrayed him. He was rigid. "Look." Benedict started putting his hands on the table. "I know tonight was messy. Personal lives got mixed with professional ones. I apologize for the disrespect, Victoria. Truly. But let's look at the bigger picture. We are family. Calloway Tech and Apex. It's a natural fit with your capital and my vision." "Your vision," Victoria interrupted, sliding a thick leather folder across the table toward him. "Yes, my vision. The AI predictive modeling. The proprietary code." "Open the folder, Benedict," she said. Benedict opened it. It wasn't a merger agreement. It was a dossier. The first page was a loan agreement from 3 years ago. "When you wanted to expand into the Asian market," Victoria said, "you over-leveraged the company. No bank would touch you. You were high risk. Remember?" "Yes," Benedict said, confused. "I found a private equity firm in Zurich, Helios Capital. They gave me the bridge loan." "Turn the page," Winston said. Benedict flipped the page, a document showing the incorporation papers of Helios Capital, owner Apex Global Holdings. Benedict stared at the paper. You own Helios." "We own the debt," Winston said calmly. "We bought your debt 3 years ago. We've been funding your little empire ever since. You didn't build Calloway Tech, son. We did. We just let you put your name on the door." Benedict felt the room spin. "But I paid the interest. I'm current on payments." "Read the covenants on page 4, Victoria said. Clause 12, subsection B, the morality and stability clause." Benedict squinted at the fine print. "In the event that the CEO engages in public conduct deemed detrimental to the reputation of the company, or in the event of a dissolution of marriage initiated by infidelity, the lender Helios Apex reserves the right to call the full principal of the loan due immediately." Benedict looked up, pale as a sheet. "You can't be serious. This is a standard boilerplate clause. Nobody enforces this." "I'm enforcing it," Winston said. "The loan is due Mr. Calloway, $400 million, payable within 24 hours. "I don't have $400 million in cash," Benedict shouted, standing up. "All my money is tied up in stock." "In the company." "Exactly," Victoria said. "Which brings us to the second document in the folder." Benedict's hands shook as he turned to the next section. It was a patent filing. "The core algorithm," Victoria explained. "The Calloway prediction model. The code that makes the company worth anything. I wrote that code." Benedict slammed his hand on the table. "Did you—" Victoria raised an eyebrow. "Or did you write the interface while I wrote the back-end logic during those nights you were networking at bars?" Benedict's mouth opened and closed. It was true. In the early days, he was the salesman. She was the engineer. He had taken the credit, and she had let him because she loved him. "The patent for the core logic," Victoria continued, "is held by a trust. The VM Trust." "VM," Benedict whispered. "Victoria Mercer." "I never assigned the IP to the company, Benedict," she said quietly. "I licensed it to Calloway Tech, a revocable license, and as of tonight I am revoking it." Benedict collapsed back into his chair. Without the IP, the company was a shell. Without the cash to pay the loan, he was bankrupt. "You trapped me," Benedict whispered. "You planned this. For how long?" "I didn't plan to trap you," Victoria said, and for a moment her voice wavered with genuine sadness. "I kept the IP and the debt structure as a safety net. My father insisted. I told him I'd never need it. I told him you loved me. I told him you were a good man." She walked around the table and stood next to him. She didn't touch him. "I gave you a chance tonight, Benedict," she said softly. "I sat in that chair in the bedroom and gave you an out. I asked if you were taking her, if you had just been honest, if you had just shown me 1 ounce of respect. I might have left the papers in the safe. I might have just divorced you quietly and let you keep your company." "But you didn't," Winston rumbled from the other end of the table. "You flaunted it. You humiliated her. You tried to make her feel small, to make yourself feel big." Benedict looked up, his eyes wet with tears of rage and fear. "So what happens now? You destroy me. You take the company." "We don't need to take it," Winston said. "It's already ours. We're just evicting the tenant." Winston checked his pocket watch. "The board has already been convened via emergency teleconference. Since Apex controls the debt and the IP, we have invoked the clause to remove the CEO for cause." "You're fired, Benedict," Victoria said. "For real this time, not like Jessica." "You can't do this," Benedict mumbled. "The public, the shareholders will be thrilled," Winston countered. "Apex is acquiring Calloway Tech fully. The stock will jump 20% in the morning. The only loser here is you." Benedict looked at his wife, his soon-to-be ex-wife, the woman he had dismissed as a boring domestic accessory. She looked like a titan. "Victoria." He tried one last time, desperation clawing at his throat. "Please, I built this. It's my life. Don't take it away. I'll leave Jessica. I'll do anything. I'll go to counseling. Just don't take my company." Victoria looked down at him. She reached out and adjusted his bow tie, which had gone crooked. It was a gesture reminiscent of the old days, but the tenderness was gone. "It's not your company, Benedict," she said, "and it never was your life. It was our life, and you broke it." She pulled a single envelope from her clutch and dropped it on the table in front of him. "Divorce papers," she said. "Sign them by morning. If you fight me, I'll release the security footage from the elevator of the Pierre Hotel, where you and Jessica, Well, let's just say the morality clause has plenty of evidence. Come, Victoria, Winston said, opening the door. We have guests to entertain, and I believe the governor wants to meet the real genius behind Callaway Tech. Victoria turned and walked toward the door. Victoria! Benedict screamed, standing up. She stopped in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the light of the party outside. She didn't look back. Goodbye, Benedict. Enjoy the Hamptons. I hear it's lovely this time of year for people with a lot of free time. The door clicked shut. Benedict Callaway stood in the silence of the Platinum Room. He looked at the whiskey glass, the dossier, and the divorce papers. He picked up the glass and threw it against the wall. It shattered into 1,000 pieces, just like the illusion of his life. But the night wasn't over, and the world outside that door was waiting to see the body. The walk from the Platinum Room back to the hotel lobby was the longest mile of Benedict Callaway's life. The gala was still in full swing, the music swelling, the laughter tinkling like broken glass in his ears. But he was a ghost. People who had been clamoring for a selfie with him an hour ago now turned their backs as he passed, studying the molding on the ceiling or suddenly becoming fascinated by their shoes. The smell of blood was in the water, and the sharks of high society knew better than to associate with a corpse. He reached the valet stand alone. Jessica was nowhere to be seen. Where is she? Benedict snapped at the valet, tossing his ticket with trembling hands. The woman in the red dress. The valet, a young man who usually looked at Benedict with awe, now looked at him with a flat, bored expression. Ms. Monroe left, sir. She took an Uber about 10 minutes ago. She took an Uber? Benedict laughed, a high, jagged sound. She left me. I bought her that dress. I bought her the shoes on her feet. She left a message, sir, the valet said, handing him a folded napkin. Benedict snatched it. Written in smeared lipstick were 2 words: card declined. Benedict crumbled the napkin and threw it into the gutter. He didn't wait for his limousine. He saw a taxi idling and threw himself into the back seat, barking the address of his secondary office in Brooklyn, a converted warehouse where he kept his private projects away from the prying eyes of the main corporate headquarters. As the taxi sped over the bridge, Benedict pulled out his phone. His notifications were a waterfall of disaster. TechCrunch, Callaway, ousted. Apex, takeover confirmed. CNBC, Victoria Mercer, revealed as silent genius behind Callaway. Tech. Twitter trending, must buy by Benedict. He scrolled through the comments. Always knew he was a fraud. He cheated on that with an intern LMAO. Winston Mercer is her dad, R.I.P. Callaway. Benedict threw the phone against the seat. They don't know, he shouted at the plexiglass divider, startling the driver. They don't know who I am. I am the visionary. I am the face. He needed leverage. Victoria thought she had checkmated him, but she had forgotten one thing. He knew where the bodies were buried, or at least he thought he did. He arrived at the Brooklyn loft, slamming the door behind him. The space was cold, filled with servers and whiteboards covered in scrawled diagrams. He went straight to the safe behind a painting of himself. He spun the dial. Click. He pulled out a hard drive. This was his insurance policy. Or so he believed. 3 years ago, when the company was scaling up, Benedict had hired a shady data mining firm to scrape user data from their competitors illegally. It was corporate espionage, plain and simple. Victoria didn't know about it. She was too ethical, too focused on the purity of the code. If this data got out, it would ruin Callaway Tech. It would trigger federal investigations, It would tank the stock price that Apex was so eager to acquire. "If I can't have the company," Benedict whispered, his eyes manic in the dim light, "then nobody gets it." He plugged the drive into his laptop. His plan was simple. Upload the evidence of the illegal data, scraping to a whistleblower site, anonymous, but traceable enough to blow back on the current board. He would burn the house down with Victoria inside it. He typed furiously, his fingers flying across the keys. He drafted an email to a journalist at the New York Times who hated big tech. Subject: The Mercer Fraud. Proof of illegal surveillance at Callaway Tech. He hit attach. The progress bar crawled across the screen. 10%, 30%. His phone rang. It was an unknown number. Benedict stared at it. He debated ignoring it, but the silence of the room was driving him mad. He answered. "Who is this, Mr. Callaway?" A voice purred. It wasn't Victoria, and it wasn't Winston. It was a smooth European accent. "This is Lars van der Hoven." Benedict froze. Lars was his biggest rival, the CEO of Dutch Stream, a company Benedict had tried to crush for years. "Lars," Benedict breathed. "You're calling to gloat." "I am calling," Lars said, "because I hear you are a free agent, and I hear you are angry." "I'm not angry," Benedict lied, watching the upload bar hit 50%. "I'm motivated." "Good. Because I have a proposition. I know about the kill switch you installed in the chaotic early days of the server architecture, the one that wipes the neural net history." Benedict stopped typing. "How do you know about that?" "I have my ways." "Listen, Benedict. Mercer is going to destroy you legally. You will be in court for 20 years. You will die poor. Unless what? Unless you trigger that switch, wipe the algorithm clean, reset Callaway Tech to 0. If you do that, the company is worthless. Apex drops the acquisition. And Lars paused. "I will hire you as a consultant, $5 million a year, plus a signing bonus, just to watch the Mercers bleed." Benedict looked at the upload bar. 70%. Leaking the illegal data would hurt them, yes, but wiping the algorithm. That would kill them. It would erase 7 years of Victoria's work. It was the nuclear option. "The switch isn't remote," Benedict said, his voice trembling. "I have to be at the main server farm, biometric entry. And your access is revoked," Lars noted. "Not yet," Benedict realized. "The IT department is slow. They won't purge the biometrics until the morning shift comes in at 6:00 a.m. It's 11:00 p.m. now." "Then you have a window," Lars said. "Do it, Benedict. Be the man you claim to be. Take back your power." Benedict hung up. He looked at the laptop screen. He cancelled the email upload. Leakage was for cowards. Destruction was for kings. He grabbed his coat. He wasn't going to hide in Brooklyn. He was going to the Citadel, the massive server fortress in New Jersey where Callaway Tech lived. He was going to erase Victoria from existence. The Callaway Tech server farm was a brutalist concrete bunker located in the marshlands of New Jersey. It looked less like a tech company and more like a prison for robots. Benedict parked his car a mile away, in the tall grass off the highway, to avoid the perimeter license plate scanners. He hiked through the mud. His tuxedo shoes ruined his expensive suit, snagged on briars. He didn't care. Adrenaline was pumping through his veins like jet fuel. He reached the employee side entrance. This was it. The moment of truth. He pressed his palm against the scanner. Please, he prayed. Be lazy, IT guys, be lazy. The scanner hummed. A green light flashed. Access granted, CEO Calloway. Yes, Benedict hissed, slipping inside. The hallway was sterile and white, humming with the sound of thousands of cooling fans. He moved quickly, avoiding the main security desk, taking the service corridors he knew from the construction phase. He needed to get to the core terminal, the physical interface for the central database. He reached the heavy steel door of the core room. He punched in his PIN code, 122477. The door hissed open. Benedict stepped into the room. It was a cathedral of blinking blue lights. Rows upon rows of server racks towered over him. In the center sat the master console. He ran to the keyboard. His hands were shaking so hard he mistyped his password twice. Login successful. He was in. He had root access. Okay, Victoria, he whispered, sweat dripping from his nose onto the keyboard. Let's see how smart you are when your precious brain is empty. He opened the command line. He began to type the sequence for the purge. Sudo rm rf root core logic. It was a command that would delete the source code and overwrite the sectors with random noise. It was irreversible. He hovered his finger over the enter key. This was it. Total victory. Total revenge. He pressed enter. Nothing happened. The screen didn't flash red. The deletion progress bar didn't appear. Instead, the text on the screen vanished. A single cursor blinked in the center of the black void. Then text began to appear, typing itself out slowly, character by character. Hello, Benedict. Benedict stared at the screen. What? I was wondering if you would try this. Daddy bet you wouldn't. He said you were too cowardly. I bet you would. Thanks for winning me $5. Victoria. Benedict shouted at the empty room. Victoria. The text continued. You aren't in the root directory. Benedict, you never were. Do you really think I gave you root access to my life's work? Benedict frantically typed ls, la, to list the files. The directory was empty, except for one file. Sandbox simulation X. You're in a sandbox, the screen typed. A fake server environment. I built for you years ago, so you could feel like a coder without breaking anything. It's a playpen, Benedict, for children. No! Benedict screamed, smashing his fist onto the keyboard. I built this company. I am the CEO. You were the mascot, the screen replied. And now you are the trespasser. Suddenly, the blue lights in the server room turned a harsh, flashing red. A siren began to wail, deafening in the enclosed space. Intruder alert. Sector 4. Police dispatched. Benedict turned to run, but the steel door he had entered through slammed shut with a magnetic clang. He ran to it, pulling uselessly on the handle. Locked. Open the door! He screamed. The text on the screen changed one last time. Look up! Benedict looked up. In the corner of the room, a security camera swiveled to face him. The red recording light was on. Smile, the text read. We are live streaming to the board meeting. Benedict backed away, his back hitting the server racks. He slid down to the floor, covering his face with his hands. He was trapped in a glass cage, watching his own reflection in the dark monitors. Minutes later, or perhaps hours, time had lost its meaning. The heavy door hissed open. It wasn't the police. Not yet. Two figures stepped in. Winston Mercer, still looking fresh in his tuxedo, leaned on his cane. Beside him was a tall, broad-shouldered man in a grey suit. Benedict recognized him immediately. It was Grant, the head of Apex Security, a man rumored to be ex-SAS. "Pathetic," Winston said, his voice cutting through the siren's wail, which Grant silenced with a tap on a tablet. "Breaking and entering, attempted destruction of corporate property, industrial sabotage." Winston shook his head. "I expected a fight, Calloway, not a tantrum." Benedict looked up, his eyes bloodshot. "It's a sandbox the whole time." "Since 2018, Winston confirmed. Victoria noticed you copying code to unauthorized drives. She didn't want to embarrass you, so she routed your access to a mirror drive. You've been stealing ghosts for 5 years. Benedict laughed. It was a broken, sobbing sound. She knew. She always knew. "She protected you," Winston said, stepping closer, "until you made it impossible." Grant stepped forward, holding a pair of zip ties. "Police are outside Mr. Mercer. Shall we hand him over?" "In a moment," Winston said. He looked down at Benedict with cold curiosity. "I want to offer you a choice, Benedict, because I am a generous man." Benedict wiped his nose on his sleeve. "What choice, jail or prison?" "Option A," Winston said. "We hand you to the FBI. The attempted deletion of the server logs is a federal cybercrime. With the evidence we have, plus the attempted sabotage tonight, you're looking at 10 to 15 years in federal prison. You'll be famous, sure, but not in the way you wanted." Benedict shuddered. He wouldn't survive prison. He was soft. "Option B," Benedict rasped. "Option B," Winston said, pulling a folded document from his inside pocket. "You sign the divorce papers, uncontested. You sign a full confession regarding the attempted sabotage, which we will keep in a vault and only use if you ever speak to the press again. And," Winston paused, "and you leave the country. Tonight. Leave the country. Grant has a plane waiting at Teterboro, one-way ticket to a location where Apex has interests. Let's say a mining operation in rural Peru. We need a shift manager for the logistics office. It pays $40,000 a year. It's honest work, hard work, no galas, no mistresses. Just you and the dirt." Benedict stared at him. "You want to banish me?" "I want you gone," Winston said simply. "Victoria doesn't want to see you in court. She doesn't want to see your face on the news. She wants you erased. So you can be erased in a cell or you can be erased in the Andes. Choose." Benedict looked at the zip ties in Grant's hands. Then he looked at the open door. He stood up, his legs shaky. He looked at the server room one last time. The blinking lights of the empire he thought he ruled, realizing he had never even held the keys. "I don't speak Spanish," Benedict whispered. "You're a smart guy," Winston said, turning to walk away. "You'll learn." 6 months later. The wind in the Peruvian Andes didn't howl. It screamed. It carried a grit that settled into the pores of your skin, a fine grey dust that tasted like copper and old earth. At the Apex Minerals Site 4 logistics office, a corrugated tin shack perched precariously on a ridge overlooking the open-pit copper mine. A man named Ben sat at a scarred metal desk. He wore a high-visibility vest over a stained flannel shirt. His hands, once manicured and soft from handling nothing heavier than a champagne flute, were now calloused, the fingernails permanently rimmed with black dirt. He was thinner, The softness of the penthouse lifestyle had been burned away by the altitude and the 12-hour shifts. "Ben," a voice shouted from the doorway. It was Matteo, the site foreman. "Truck 14 has a blown gasket. We need the requisition form signed. Now." Ben looked up. He didn't argue. He didn't ask Matteo to speak to him with respect. He simply pulled a clipboard closer, his eyes dull behind cheap reading glasses, and signed B. Calloway. "Thank you, boss," Matteo grunted sarcastically, snatching the clipboard and leaving the door open to the biting wind. Ben shivered. He stood up to close the door, but paused. Outside, the view was majestic in a brutal way, jagged peaks tearing at the sky. But there was no cell service here, no Wi-Fi, just a satellite uplift in the main office that was strictly for business data. Ben walked back to his desk. It was lunch break. He pulled a ham sandwich from a paper bag. He sat down and looked at the one personal item he was allowed to keep. It wasn't a photo of Victoria. That was too painful. It wasn't a photo of Jessica. That was too embarrassing. It was a torn page from an old Forbes magazine he had found in the latrine 3 weeks ago. It was dated from last month. The cover featured a woman standing on the balcony of a glass skyscraper, the wind catching her hair. She wore a white power suit that looked like armor. She wasn't smiling to please anyone. She was smiling because she had won. The headline: Mercer AI unveiled. Victoria Mercer on reclaiming her tech, her name and her future. Ben chewed his dry sandwich and read the article for the 100th time. After the departure of disgraced former CEO Benedict Calloway, the company has seen a 40% surge in stock value. "The shackles are off," Ms. Mercer told Forbes. "We spent years trying to make the technology look flashy for investors. Now we are making it useful for humanity. The predictive health algorithm launched last week has already identified early-stage cancer in 5,000 patients." The article went on to mention the restructuring. So Jessica Monroe had been sued for the theft of corporate property, the earrings and a company credit card, and was currently working as a hostess at a mid-tier nightclub in Jersey City, her reputation in high society incinerated. But the part that killed Ben, the part that he read until the words blurred, was the final quote. Interviewer: "Do you miss the partnership you had with Mr. Calloway?" Victoria Mercer: "I miss the man I thought he was. But I realized that I was in love with a reflection. I was the light, and he was just the mirror. Once I walked away, he stopped shining." Ben folded the magazine carefully and put it back in his drawer. He walked to the dirty window. He thought about the gala. He thought about the moment he told her to go to the Hamptons. He thought about the silence of the server room. "I was the mirror," he whispered to the mountains. He had wanted to be a billionaire. He had wanted to be a king. And in a way, he had gotten his wish. He was the king of this tin shack. He was the billionaire of dust. "Ben," Matteo shouted from the yard, "the toilet is backed up again. Grab the plunger." Ben Calloway, the man who once thought he was too good to hold his wife's hand in public, buttoned his jacket against the cold. "Coming!" he yelled back. He grabbed the plunger and walked out into the wind, 1 foot in front of the other, paying his debt, one dirty job at a time. Meanwhile, in New York City, Victoria stood in the penthouse office of the newly christened Mercer Tech Tower. The view of Central Park was breathtaking, bathed in the golden light of autumn. "Ms. Mercer." She turned. It was her new assistant, a bright young man fresh out of MIT. "The board is ready for you, ma'am. And your father is on line 1. Victoria smiled. She picked up the phone. Hi, Daddy. I saw the quarterly reports, Tory. Winston's voice rasped, warm and proud. You outperformed my projections. I might have to retire for real this time. Don't threaten me with a good time. Victoria laughed. How is Geneva? Cold bring. I miss the action. By the way, I received a report from the south. Our friend in the Andes is meeting his quotas. He hasn't complained once. Victoria looked out the window. For a moment she pictured Benedict. Not the monster at the gala, but the boy she met in the diner. She felt a pang of pity, but it was distant, like a memory of a scraped knee from childhood. Good, Victoria said softly. Maybe he's finally building something real. Do you want me to bring him back? Winston asked. His contract is up for review in 5 years. Victoria touched the sapphire necklace she wore, the same one she had worn to the gala. It was no longer a costume. It was her skin. No, she said firmly. Let him finish the work. I have a meeting to get to. That's my girl, Winston said. Victoria hung up the phone. She grabbed her tablet and walked toward the double doors. She didn't look back at the empty chair where Benedict used to sit. She didn't need to. She walked into the boardroom, and as she entered, 12 men in expensive suits stood up out of respect. She sat at the head of the table. Gentleman Victoria Mercer said, her voice clear and ringing with authority. Let's get to work. Wow. Talk about a reality check. Benedict thought he was the main character, but he found out the hard way that you never ever mistake kindness for weakness. He traded a diamond for a rock, and he ended up digging for rocks in the Andes. It's a brutal lesson, but it's real. When you build your castle on an ego, it only takes that one person to pull the rug out. Victoria didn't just get revenge. She got justice. She reclaimed her brain, her name, and her dignity. So here is my question for you guys. If you were Victoria, would you have sent Benedict to the mine? Or would you have just handed him to the FBI and let him go to prison? Does he deserve a second chance after 5 years, or should he stay in the dust forever? Let me know your verdict in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of karma and justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss the next drama. We have a crazy story coming up next week about a lottery winner who hid his ticket from his greedy family. You won't want to miss that. Thanks for watching, and remember, be careful who you step on your way up. You might meet them on your way down.